Sarajevo, winter of 1993. A former banker offers a gold necklace worth 2 months of pre-war salary. The asking price, 3 disposable lighters and a pack of cigarettes. The gold was authentic, but in a besieged city with no electricity, no running water, and collapsing food distribution, that necklace was just decorative. Metal, the lighters represented something more fundamental: fire for cooking, heat for survival, water purification to prevent disease. This exchange was documented by Selco Begovic, who chronicled more than a year living through the siege, and the pattern he recorded challenges every assumption about what holds value when monetary systems fail. This video examines what actually functioned as valuable assets during 5 documented currency collapses, not theory, historical evidence. When national currencies fail, the transition happens faster than economic models predict. The Bosnian conflict provides detailed documentation of this speed. A functioning monetary economy converted to pure barter within months, not years or decades. Early documentation shows residents initially attempting to use existing currency. Within weeks, price inflation reached factors of 20 to 100. Items that traded for modest amounts outside conflict zones commanded prices 30 times higher inside the siege perimeter. The velocity of this transition is consistent across different collapse scenarios. Venezuela between 2010 and 2015 experienced cumulative inflation exceeding 1 million%. The bolivar depreciated so severely that citizens created an informal term for it, the dead bolivar. Government response included removing high-denomination bills from circulation and mandating currency exchange within 72 hours. 72 hours. That represents the window citizens had to convert savings before official currency was declared invalid. Argentina from 1998 to 2001 saw economic contraction of 28%. More than half the population fell below poverty thresholds. Those holding peso-denominated savings experienced severe purchasing power loss. The pattern repeats: different countries, different decades, same fundamental mechanism. When official currency loses function, documented evidence shows economies revert to direct exchange systems, and in those systems, only practical utility determines value. Contemporary Venezuela provides real-time documentation. Fishermen at coastal areas exchange their catch directly for rice, plantains, and other staples. One fisherman's statement was documented: "Money doesn't purchase anything, better for people to bring food in exchange for fish." Farmers travel significant distances to urban centers carrying produce: 200 bananas, 30 kilograms of yams, 30 of cassava, 40 kilograms of citrus fruit, not to sell for currency, to exchange directly for flour, rice, or pasta. In coffee-producing regions, hardware merchants accept coffee beans as payment. The exchange rate: 3 100 kilogram sacks of coffee for 200 liters of gasoline. Coffee beans function as currency because they meet specific criteria: standardized, consumable, possess inherent use value. This represents economic reversion. Modern collapse sends economic systems backward to pre-industrial exchange mechanisms. In that environment, precious metals face a fundamental problem. Gold cannot be consumed as food, cannot be burned for heat, cannot purify water or treat medical conditions. But individuals who can produce food, repair essential equipment, or provide medical supplies possess tradable value. Historical evidence from the Great Depression reveals a specific pattern: agricultural land and practical skills outperformed financial assets. Farmers during that period faced severe challenges. Crop prices fell to levels where some burned corn as fuel because it cost less than coal. But farmers with productive land maintained one irreplaceable advantage: the capacity to produce their own food. Documentation from rural Iowa shows farm families cultivated large vegetable gardens, preserved fruit from orchards, produced dairy from cattle, and supplied themselves with meat and eggs from poultry. They purchased flour and sugar in bulk and produced their own bread. Farm wives created clothing from material cut from flour and feed sacks. Zero monetary income, survived the crisis anyway. Urban families faced different conditions. In Dubuque, Iowa, 2,200 workers lost employment between 1927 and 1934. Those workers, even if they had maintained wages, which fell 30%, faced food insecurity because they possessed no productive capacity. One account stated it clearly: survival came from a small farm and carpentry skills, not savings, not precious metals. Victory Gardens during World War II demonstrated this principle at national scale. More than 20 million gardens were planted in 1943. They produced 10 billion pounds of food. 40% of total U.S. vegetable supply originated from these gardens. 2/3 were located in towns, cities, and suburban areas. By 1944, more than half of Americans cultivating gardens reported doing so from economic necessity, not patriotic motivation. The mechanism is straightforward. Farmland produces value regardless of economic conditions. Crops, rental income, direct food production. Academic analysis shows farmland appreciated 17% during the 2008-2009 financial crisis, while the S&P 500 declined 46%. Between 2000 and 2009, the S&P 500 posted negative returns in 28 different quarters. In 26 of those 28 quarters when equities declined, farmland posted positive returns. Not speculation, systemic stability. During economic crisis, specific skills become survival capital. The Great Depression era strategies read like documentation of practical production. People engaged in fishing and selling the catch, producing homemade food products, growing and selling berries, operating mobile food services, providing snow removal, creating and selling handwoven items, producing and selling quilts, mending and altering clothing, window washing, food preservation through canning. The pattern is consistent. Every activity involves creating or processing something with tangible value: food, clothing, shelter-related services. Skills commanding highest value addressed fundamental human needs: food production and preservation, clothing production and repair, shelter maintenance, medical care, mechanical repair. An individual capable of slaughtering livestock, preserving meat through smoking, or canning vegetables possessed income-generating capacity no economic collapse could eliminate. Medical professionals remained employed throughout the Depression. People found methods to compensate them even when currency was unstable, trading goods and services for medical care. The distinction is fundamental. A skilled carpenter represents productive capacity that cannot be stored in a vault. The skill exists in the person and can be deployed whenever conditions require it. Gold sits in storage producing nothing. Selco's documentation from Sarajevo reveals what actually traded during complete monetary collapse. When currency became worthless, certain items emerged as most valuable. Ammunition ranked highest because people required it for hunting and security, but Selco documented warnings about trading it freely. Whatever weapon-related items you trade to another person might be used against you the following day. Security considerations dominated all exchange decisions during collapse. Hygiene items held remarkable exchange value. Bleach could purify hundreds of gallons of water, worth far more than its pre-crisis cost. Bars of soap, toothpaste, feminine hygiene products, these commanded significant prices. A bar of soap that cost modest amounts before the conflict traded for a dozen eggs during the siege. Medicine held extreme value. Antibiotics, pain relievers, first aid supplies. Many deaths resulted from lack of access to basic medications. But here's the documented insight that challenges conventional thinking. Selco recommended acquiring 1,000 disposable lighters rather than a fuel-powered generator. A generator costs thousands of currency units. Why lighters instead? A generator produces noise, consumes scarce fuel, requires maintenance, and attracts attention from those who might confiscate it. Lighters are silent, portable, distributed across multiple units, so losing some doesn't eliminate fire-starting capability, inexpensive to acquire before crisis, and can be refilled. Small practical items addressing fundamental needs held more reliable exchange value than expensive technological solutions vulnerable to theft or requiring scarce fuel. Selco documented having a large propane container adapted to refill disposable lighters. He exchanged filled lighters for food, candles, and other necessities. The principle is clear. A lighter provides fire for heating, cooking, and illumination. In siege conditions, these functions are non-negotiable for survival. And here's what the documentation shows about precious metals. Gold and jewelry held poor exchange value during the crisis itself. Selco's account notes that armed groups took precious metals from desperate people at extremely low valuations. The groups understood metals would retain value once crisis ended, but they were worthless. For immediate survival, Venezuela provides contemporary real-time evidence. This isn't historical theory. Venezuela's currency collapse is documented as it unfolds. One woman named Keila Alvale cultivates eggplant, tomato, and passion fruit in her residential yard specifically for bartering. She exchanges produce for pasta, sugar, milk, or rice. She noted this lifestyle mirrors how her family operated in the early 20th century. Modern economic collapse reverts societies to pre-modern economic structures. A fisherman in Padanemo stated he hasn't traveled to the city center in nearly 2 years. What purpose would it serve? Insufficient money to purchase basic clothing. Better to remain local, exchanging goods for survival. Official currency became so dysfunctional that effort to obtain it through wage labor wasn't worth the return. In Zimbabwe's parallel collapse, black market medicine prices exploded. Antibiotics that cost modest amounts in stable economies commanded prices multiples of original cost. A dose of amoxicillin could represent weeks of average wages. Those who accumulated basic antibiotics, bandages, pain relievers, and antiseptic materials held extremely valuable assets relative to acquisition cost and storage requirements. Contrast this with precious metals. An individual possessing silver couldn't use it to treat an infected wound, couldn't consume it for nutrition, couldn't burn it for heat, but antibiotics could represent the difference between survival and death from treatable infection. Community networks represent the overlooked variable determining survival outcomes. Meta-analytic studies across 148 studies with over 300,000 participants found that individuals with stronger social relationships had 50% increased likelihood of survival. 50%. That effect size is comparable to smoking cessation and exceeds many established mortality risk factors. Selco's documentation emphasizes this pattern. He notes that nearly all exchanges occurred through private arrangements after obtaining information about someone possessing goods for trade. The optimal situation was knowing that person before the crisis. Trust already established. Trust-based relationships become economic infrastructure when formal systems collapse. Communities with established structures coordinate response, pool resources, and provide support far more effectively than isolated households. In Venezuela, communities informally organized food sharing and barter networks helping distribute scarce resources. In Bosnia, communities organized around trusted individuals to manage security, allocate resources, and coordinate survival strategies. Social capital functions as survival capital. The comparative analysis reveals gold's fundamental limitation as collapse insurance. In the Bosnian siege, where economic system collapsed most completely, gold held virtually no exchange value during the crisis itself. The core problem: gold produces no income and addresses no immediate survival requirement. Food provides nutrition, tools enable production and repair, skills generate services people exchange for. But gold is inettable, non-functional, only valuable if someone else wants to acquire it. In early collapse phases, when people desperately need food, tools, and medicine, gold is not what they seek. In later phases, when systems stabilize around new equilibrium, gold might regain value. But the individual holding only gold while others hold productive assets will have endured the crisis without generating income or survival means. During the 2008-2009 financial crisis, farmland increased in value by 17% while the SP500 declined 46%, and gold initially declined before recovering. Farmland provided stable income returns throughout: rental value, crop sales, direct food production, regardless of what other assets did. The documented data: farmland's average volatility from 1992to2020是 6.84%, less than half the SP500's volatility of 16.9%, and notably lower than gold's volatility of 14.8%. During periods of high inflation, farmland returns averaged 14.67% annually, more than double the average inflation rate itself. Not theoretical projection, historical fact. Current warning signals appear in multiple locations. Venezuela represents stage 5 complete collapse, barter economy, currency worthless. Turkey, advancing through stage 3, official inflation understated, gold account ownership doubled as citizens exit the lira. Lebanon, stage 4, banks froze accounts, currency lost 98% of value in 18 months. The United States, $38 trillion in debt, Congressional Budget Office projects deficits continuing indefinitely, interest payments on debt now exceed defense spending. Federal Reserve balance sheet expanded by trillions since 2008. Central banks globally purchasing gold at fastest pace since 1996. More gold than U.S. Treasuries for the first time in decades. For the first time in monetary history, 100% of global currencies are fiat with none backed by tangible commodities. With global interdependency, major currency failures likely propagate simultaneously rather than sequentially. The historical evidence from multiple documented collapses converges on consistent conclusions. When monetary systems fail and institutional support collapses, survival depends on productive capacity, practical skills, and community networks, not gold, not savings accounts, not financial securities. The pattern has repeated across Bosnia, Venezuela, the Great Depression, Zimbabwe, Argentina, and recent financial crises. The evidence is documented, the mechanism is understood. Understanding how currency collapse actually unfolds based on historical evidence provides clarity about what holds value when monetary systems fail. The data shows productive assets, practical skills, and social networks outperform precious metals during the crisis period itself. This is financial history decoded, pattern analysis of economic collapse based on documented historical evidence.